Welcome to the Motogp Xtra podcast.
So we are well and truly into the flyweight leg of the season, and other than GP getting a little bit closer and a little bit further away in some parts, the other championships are kind of done. So the big part of this podcast will of course be spent on MotoGP because we have a bit of a title battle. Obviously Moto2 isn't done yet, Moto3 was done last time out. But yeah, Rhys, we went back to Phillip Island. We had weather, we had scary crashes, we had Mother of God nature into turn one with the wind. It was our typical Phillip Island race weekend, wasn't it really, in many senses?
Yeah, don't forget the animals on the track throughout practice as well.
Yeah, there'll be a segment at some point in the podcast where we talk about how many jackets, unfortunately. Yeah.
Typical Phillip Island weekend, yeah, pretty much. You turn up at Phillip Island, you always get this. It's a great circuit because it is so different to pretty much every single track we go to. I mean, there's some similarities to some others, but nothing is quite as fast and flowing as Phillip Island. Yes, you've got Silverstone, yes, you've got Assen, but this is just a bit different. It's very old school. You know, I think there would be maybe some question marks if they were to add it to the calendar today. I don't think it's particularly ridiculously unsafe or anything, but I think there would probably be maybe some changes. They'd be probably more green if they added it to the calendar today. Let's put it that way, which is actually probably a bad thing because it seems to work pretty well. But yeah, pretty much standard Phillip Island weekend. You got all these weird scenarios, mix them up, put it on a great track, and well, if we compare it to Motogp, we had an absolutely fantastic weekend because we had nothing to say there, and I'm sure it's not going to be the same here. There's plenty to talk about this weekend.
So yeah, we will jump straight into Moto3. We'll get right into the action. And Moto3, Phillip Island, it was always, no matter, you could put them out on the actual rims themselves with no tyres, they'll somehow be a big group race. It'll just happen the way it is. The slipstream out of the last corner, the flying nature of the track, it's very hard to make a break. So, at least when we were halfway into the race, first quarter of the race, the first probably 3/4 of the race, really, it was like 18, 15, 16 riders. It was just a massive group, and it's quite hard for us on the podcast to talk because there's so much going on at the start of the race that there's kind of nothing of note to mention because there's been so many overtakes and stuff, and it's hard to kind of nearly make points in it. But one person who we will get to early and we'll probably cover them all at once is the home hero, Kelso. Unfortunately, didn't end up finishing towards the front, but he was up leading at one point. It was good to see. Obviously, we have Rooston in there as well. I think he finished around 11, but in the end, they were both 10th and 14th, I think, in the final standings. But after all the big group racing, I was hoping that Kelso could hang on, but unfortunately, he didn't. But Rhys, was it a surprise, really? He's faded since he's done that all year long?
Not really. I mean, it happened quite quickly. I don't know what happened to him, but he was about 5th, and then he was suddenly about 15th. So I think he must have ran wide or got nerfed wide. I don't think it got caught. Didn't really get mentioned. They noticed that he dropped, but they didn't see the move happen. So, yeah, I think it would have happened eventually anyway. Like you said, he was running in the lead for a little while. So Boe won 2 for a little while, which I don't think something that's really ever happened before. So it's good to see that team definitely making some strides. So it's well, they've had Munoz the last few years. It's kind of been flying the flag for them, but they've pretty much been a one-rider outfit, really, till Kelso turned up, and then they've, to be fair, this last sort of half the season or whatever, Kelso's been there or thereabouts. Munoz's kind of found his form a bit, so it's good to see those guys running 1-2. Obviously, always good for Kelso as well as been running in the lead of his home race. But yeah, it's the kind of sums up his season. We had that a lot this weekend, where people's weekends pretty much summed up their season. And yeah, Joe Kelso leading to start with. Don't even know where he finished in the end. Obviously, like you said, was he about 14th or something? But he dropped back, seemingly not for no reason. I guess he must have ran wide or got pushed wide because he just went all at once. He didn't slowly fade. But yeah, that was pretty much it. And like you say, that has been his season. He's been pretty fast in little sprints, little bits here and there, then drop back a little bit. I can't remember where he's going next year now, but I'm pretty sure he's moving team, isn't he? So we'll have to see. Maybe moving into a bit more of a Premier team will just give him that last little click potentially, and he might be there week in, week out. Well, he kind of is there week in, week out, but actually to stay there for the whole race, because that just seems to be the last little bit is missing. He seems to have the pace to now have to stick with the leaders, at least for a little while. Obviously with the front guys moving on as well, so some of the guys that he's been struggling to keep up with this year won't be there next year, so he might be one of those guys. So yeah, I'd be interested to see if he can make that step, but unfortunately, like you say, he did just sort of disappear as per usual in this one.
Yeah, it's kind of his MO at the moment in this class. It's unfortunate because he's someone who's had much of the season. If we go back to last year, he had that horrible crash in Portimao after having a really good promising opening round, and then his season never took off after that. And then this year, it was kind of like, oh, he's there most weeks, but he's probably a rider who maybe just uses a bit too much tire, or maybe is just maybe using too much of his speed to kind of be thereabouts. Maybe his natural pace is around the 8th or 9th, and he has to maybe go on the limit to try and keep up with them, and then ends up no tire, kind of similar to what for me and Aldegare's done for most of the year. But yeah, it was good to see him leading his home race. It's definitely a good experience for him, and hopefully he can build upon that for the rest of the season, because it's getting towards the end of the season now. He needs to kind of finish it on high, and again, he is moving team. I'm also, at this point of the year, I'm so tired of motorsport. I can't even remember where for the first half of the segment. I couldn't remember his first name. That's at the point of the championship where
it's Joel. Joel is his first name.
It came to me halfway through because I kept saying Kelso, and I was like, Christ, I don't even know the guy's name, and I'm talking about him here. It's this part of the year where rider transfers, they're moving around. I can't even remember people's names and getting nationalities wrong. So it's pretty good now that PSP has done, World Superbike has done, and we've a few GPs left, and I can go into hibernation again for the rest of 24. But it's just hopefully he can figure out his tire woes, because I think there is a good rider in there, and he is young, so it'd be good to see, because there is ages in Moto2, but there's not a lot of Aussies coming through. And obviously, if you go back through the years, not of late, we've only had Jack really in late in the top class, but if you go back to like Stoner, Doohan, Gardner, there's been plenty of world level.
We have Brian Starrett.
And that guy too, yeah.
A few years back.
Yeah, we had him in as well. So we had a few, but
Brock Parks was an Aussie as well.
I think he was New Zealand. He's in the Oceania area, but I don't think he could be Aussie New Zealand. He's one or the other, I believe. But just over the last few years, there's been not many. Obviously, we had Gardner, who kind of got chewed up and spat out of the GP category. So we're kind of hoping for another star to come through, and I think Kelso may have the potential if he can kind of build on a decent season. Now, it was one of those massive races, and then we had position 3 and 4 in the championship Clyde. We saw a small replay. It looked like Calavera had kind of got set up by I think it was one of the BOE. I think was it Munoz who set him up, and unfortunately went widen into the side of Ortola. For that kind of rounds off that Holgado pretty much has second in this championship. For most of the year, we've been kind of bigging up the championship battle. Now that's over, we're kind of looking at who's going to finish second and third, and it's probably going to be Holgado second, I think, just judging the way it's kind of finished now. Rhys, do you see any other way happening in the last few races after the two of them took each other out today?
Yeah, I can't really see it going anywhere else. Of course, Colin Vire was wasn't even really trying to make a move. Piqueras it was, swooped around the outside and took his front wheel away from him, and then he just crashed. And unfortunately, Ortola was just on the outside and got collected. Just one of those things. Vire went to the garage afterwards to sort of explain it and apologise to him. They seemed like they were all good. I think you're right, because as we've said, Holgado has been a bit yo-yo-y this season. I think overall, I feel like Ortola and Vire have probably been quicker than him and probably had more impressive races, but they have crashed more as the season's gone on, whereas Holgado, he does have the off weekend, but he does finish P10, he doesn't crash, and it does make the difference, doesn't it? I mean, he's maybe not been as anonymous this year as he was last year in some rounds, but definitely had some rounds where he's disappeared, and those guys obviously losing points. Ortola obviously crashed last race as well, Motegi, so there's no points for him there. Vire crashed the race before in Indonesia out the lead, didn't he? So you can just see how these points just stack up, and those three were pretty much all tied a few rounds ago, whereas now I think you're right, Holgado probably has got a bit of a one hand on it. There's 3 rounds to go. As long as he just finishes well, I think he brings that one home. I'm not exactly sure on the points picture. It'd be more interesting probably for third place now between Vire and Ortola, and I don't know how far Munoz is behind, because he's the next guy, I'm pretty sure, which, yeah, I mean, we've seen him do the same thing.
As of now, he's not. He's not. P5 was a Honda, believe it or not. I'll give you that.
Oh, is it Fernandez?
It is, yeah. He's 1 point ahead.
He's been having really good.
Of Munoz. Yeah. The current standings, 2-3-2 for Holgado. It's crazy. 3-4-6 for Alonso to 2-3-2 for the second man. It's just like, that's ridiculous. 209 for Vire, so yeah, that's it would take a mistake, or he'd need a race or something. And 191 for Ortola after no score today, so it's probably
spread out a bit.
It's quite spread out, considering you are right that not long ago we were saying that they were pretty much level on points. So it's ended up over these flyaway races, which we always say, it does kind of make mistakes and things happen, and we've seen a lot of mistakes in the Moto3 class, and it's gotten very spread out definitely over the last few weeks.
Yep, definitely changing up then. So looks like Holgarda's pretty much got it summed up. I mean, you can't 100% say Moto3 because if we saw today, you can pretty much get taken out from, not your own fault, and you can also collect your championship rival when it's not your fault as well, really. So, yeah, anything could happen. So you have got some wild cards up there. Munoz, you've got Piqueras, you've got Adrian Fernandez, some pretty aggressive guys that haven't really got anything to lose. They're probably scrapping over that P5 in the championship. So, yeah, it's something to go there. And yeah, I would imagine Holgardo is going to take it home now, but you can never say anything with 100% certainty in Moto3, that's for sure, because just we've seen crazy things happen, especially still 2 flyaways to go, which, yeah, okay, Sepang is probably the least flyaway, but still, it does still throw up some weird things occasionally.
Humidity and stuff there. We can get weather and stuff there. Sepang, I still class that as one of the toughest challenges because of the humidity. Why one of the most physical races of the year. It's a crazy one, but
they play out quite normally though. Still,
yeah, it does.
Fine.
Yeah, it kind of plays out like a Catalunya.
Because it's like a European track just stuck in like Malaysia, whereas a lot of the other ones are these strange, quirky tracks. Whereas like Sepang's normal track, just weird, humid conditions.
Yeah, true. To finish up on Moto3, we have to talk about the brilliant performance once again. He's matched Rossi's record now. That of course is Alonso, and yeah, he was anonymous for most of the race, and he won by like 4 seconds or 3 seconds. He is ridiculous. Like, we talk about how second and third and fourth in the championship there, and then you just look at the championship, and it's kind of, when it's on the TV, you see, he's 100 points ahead, but when you see 340 points compared to like Holgado's barely at 230 points, it's just, the gap is huge. It just really goes into show how good a season is. And again, we're sitting here today talk about how he's won another race. Matt Rossi, realistically, he's going to take the record. He's now also won 4 in a row, which is equal Marc Marquez, so a pretty monumental race today for him to match a Rossi record and a Marquez record in one race. That's some going. And yeah, he's realistically, I'd imagine next time out he probably will go for 5 and he will take 12 in a season, so that's another record he'd probably break. He's had, I can't think of a season for any rider that's been dominant in any other class as he's had this year. He's really been spot on, and today he was absolutely perfect.
Yeah, it's like Marquez 2019, Rossi like 03, isn't it? Kind
literally, yeah, doing 95, whatever that year was.
Yeah, was that the year where he basically won every race?
Yeah, 1, and then 2.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. It's just, it has been ridiculous. I mean, again, like you say, he was a bit anonymous. He was pretty much there or thereabouts the whole time, but he just saved his tyre because with about 3 to go, he just went, didn't he? He took the lead and he went past Adrian Fernandez, who had been leading for a little while, and yeah, then just literally just put in like a fastest lap and was gone, and no one could keep up with him. I don't know if he was 3 seconds up the road, but he had a decent gap by the end. He definitely, he's kind of got over that. We saw in the first couple of rounds, wasn't maybe the best at looking after his tyre. We even seen it in Aragon, which wasn't too long ago, that he cooked his tyre trying to go away too fast at the beginning. But clearly he has that under control. He can manage it when he needs to. He's won at every different type of track. He's won in different situations. Like we said, he's won in last lap scraps. He's won coming further back from along that penalty. He's won by looking after the tyre. He has just won in every single way. Like you say, he's taken the record. Well, he's matched the record so far of Rossi. Even copied the celebration. I'd never seen that celebration before. I'd love to know the story actually behind that celebration, because it seems a bit random to have a bandage around your head, but there you go. Apparently that was what Rossi did when he beat that record, so Alonso sort of just took a bit of a nod at that and just did the same thing. But yeah, like you say, I think he probably will go and beat the record. I mean, it's possible that he won't, because we have seen him go and like finish second a few times in a row previously, but seems unlikely. He just has such an advantage over everybody. Again, we've still got a couple of flyaways to go. I mean, he's probably going to be quite good at Valencia as well. I'm sure he's raced there plenty of times, and that's almost like a mini flyaway, not in terms of actual distance, but in terms of the fact that it's weird conditions and a bit of a quirky track in a way. So yeah, I imagine he'll win at least one more, take that record, but be interesting to see who's ahead on percentages, because obviously Rossi had to do it in a lot less races, so yeah, we'll have to see, but it's always difficult to compare these eras. But to even match that record is ridiculous, because it's Moto3. It's pure randomness. The fact you can consistently win in a random class is just even more impressive, I think, than winning in a bit more of a straightforward sort of race.
Yeah, over the whole history of Moto3 since it switched from the 1 to 5 class, we've never seen someone dominate this much. We've seen riders who've had advantage and win by much and so that, but never week in, week out has a rider won so much and he won by 2.936, so almost 3 seconds. And that, again,
Oh, it was.
winning at Phillip
It was bigger
Island
than I
by that
thought.
much is another kind of margin. And I still think Rossi will probably have the percentage game, because I think he did 11 in 16, whereas I think now it's 11 in 17 for Alonso. I might be correct in saying, or I think Rossi could have been 10, 11 and 15, but whatever way you look at it, back in 96 when that was done, you had pretty much factory Aprilia teams that were 1 to 5 special teams. So as much as we look at Moto 3 and think everyone could win, back in the day not everyone could win. So it's always hard to compare eras when you just don't know how good everyone is. Back in the day, you didn't know, like Grand Prix racing in the 90s in the 125 class, it wouldn't have been what Moto 3 is today. Like, there's no question there, but still, it is no mean feat to win that many races in a season. And yeah, it's actually good he's moving up, because I think if he didn't move up, it would be very boring for the class next year, because I think he just has such an advantage. And I think if we take him out of it, a lot of other people would have won races, and we probably had a really good title kind of run in for the end of the year, something probably similar to what we've seen in the past. But unfortunately this year it's been dominated by one man. So Moto 2, as I bang on every week, has been my favourite class of the year. And going to Phillip Island, a track that usually does eat tyres, and you have to have something about you to get a race win. I was really actually looking forward to this race. Moto 3 is just your usual madness, where there's going to be overtakes every lap until the end. So you kind of nearly could get away with not watching the first 3 quarters and watching the last bit, because it's going to be the exact same. There's going to be drama and everything. But in Moto 2, it was actually a much different race. So it was a very, very heavy tyre race, but there was a couple of guys bolted. The 2 Bosco Scoras and Aaron Canet absolutely bolted off the line. Unfortunately, Dixon was collected at the start by, was it Dennis Foggia? So there was a couple of people you were there. You definitely would have thought Dixon, not having a great weekend, he would have been someone that over a tyre race usually comes to the front. You had Iagora, another guy who you would think definitely when the tyres drop, he'd be the man. But one person I wouldn't think is Aaron Canet. And when he started bolting straight out of race, I was thinking, geez, he's not learned, has he? He's going to make these mistakes again, as well as Alonso Lopez, as well as Fermin Alguer. I was looking at it as whoever finishes or whoever is in P4 right now, I was thinking they're going to pick up the pieces when these 3 guys are running on the rims in about 10 laps. Did you have the same kind of opinion, or am I a cynic in some ways?
No, 100% agreed. The 3 people you probably think are worse at looking after tyres were the 3 that were pulling away from everybody. And they weren't doing it by a small margin. They were like 2 seconds a lap quicker some laps than the rest of the field, which is crazy. It seemed like they had done in qualifying, but they basically just gone, well, Aldeguer at least had gone flat out basically for 10 laps in qualifying. Because obviously the weird conditions and trying to find dry time, I think they kind of used qualifying, just went round and round a bit like they did with the Dunlops. And I think they found the wear was pretty minimal, even though they're being warned. So I think they just took that and ran with it. And, well, it seemed to work. They were absolutely miles clear of everybody else. They didn't seem to drop off at the end. They were slower than everybody else at the end, but they were only going about as fast as everybody else was going earlier on. So it wasn't like they dropped off massively. They just obviously ran out of tyre a little bit at the end. But yeah, those 3 obviously all pulled away. Start with Lopez and Aldeguer were going at it a little bit, then Aldeguer took the lead and Canet kind of went with him, and they dropped Lopez, then Lopez obviously went down, and we were left with obviously a little bit of a showdown between the 2 of them. But yeah, I absolutely thought the same thing with the tyres. I was also thinking the same thing about Dixon. He usually comes through the tyres. Obviously, I think it was Sasaki that knocked him off, and I think he collected Foggia, I think.
Yeah, you're correct.
I haven't seen a replay, so I don't know exactly what happened in that one, but it's Southern Loop turn. I was going to say Southern Loop turn 1 then, but it's not. It's lap 1 is what I meant to say. So yeah, it happens every year. We've seen it time and time again. It all scopes up there. Did a bit of contact. Happens on the first lap. That's what happens when you don't qualify very well as well. So you've got to make sure you're always towards the front. So that's at one potential contender out the race. I was actually surprised that Agora was kind of struggling, but I think he doesn't like this track very much, and yeah, it kind of makes sense. Not exactly high speed flying rider, is he? So yeah, I was surprised he perhaps didn't come through a little bit more. He was about the only tyre specialist. Arbolino was a bit anonymous. Well, he missed a gear shift again, I remember, into MG. That was about the only thing I saw him do all race. So yeah, really, it was weird. It was a tyre wear race, but probably the 3 least tyre weary guys are actually out front, sort of dominating it.
Which has kind of been a bit of kind of some the year this year we've had some tyre races where not the usual folks kind of that can save tyres can make it happen. It's been the switch to Pirellis have been very interesting, and I think for the better for the class. But they have thrown up some weird races where the form book has kind of gone out the window. And when they were bolting today, I was thinking to myself, there's just absolutely no way either of these guys are going to make this finish. One of them's going to crash. One of them's going to be 4 or 5 seconds off the pace at the end of the race. And well, one of them did crash, unfortunately for Lopez, but the other two were just brilliant and so strange. And again, you mentioned you thought Iogura had done a bit better, but again, you gotta think of Iogura. He is literally, if you could design a racetrack for him, it would probably be just a square, nice heavy straight line braking. That is where he is very, very strong. If you remember back to Austria before his crash, he looked like he was going to walk that weekend. So the polar opposites of Phillip Island, where it's all on the edge of tire, long corners, lots of elevation change, probably isn't his best. So for him to be
next week then at Chang.
Yeah, exactly. Very stop-starty and very heavy braking. So I'd imagine he'll probably wrap it up there, to be honest, because he doesn't need much points now. And again, I'd imagine high kind of humid temperatures and a bit of a dirty racetrack. I'd like to see what he can do. I'd imagine he will be strong there, but the race kind of played out very, very strangely because, again, as you mentioned, the drop off just didn't ever seem to come, which was strange. And it looked like the rest of the field was pretty hamstrung as well until St. Ages made his way up into the top 5, top 6, and then he just seemed to have serious pace. And I think at one point towards the last 5-6 laps, fastest man on track. So shame, maybe slightly better qualifying him, and he could have had a better result. But we'll get to him later. The last lap battle between the two. First off, great last lap. Aldeguer started leading, kind of passed him, and into MG we have 7-8 collisions in one corner. What did you make of that, Rhys? Penalty, no penalty, warning, nothing? Should the race have been should the results have been changed? Should Can have got given the race win, or what side of the fence are you on?
Well, it was a good last lap, wasn't it? I was actually surprised that Canet was able to get the run and sort of pass Aldeguer, because Aldeguer had kind of been quicker than him all race, really. Aldeguer had been leading. Aldeguer then made a mistake which allowed Canet to... Well, we actually didn't see it, but he had like half a second lead, and then all of a sudden Canet was on him and Canet passed him, so it's kind of like, well, I guess he made a mistake. And then he did run wide, I think, didn't he? And lost a bit of a gap. So that kind of was the reason why he was behind. He caught back up to him. Canet then himself ran wide, and Aldeguer was through, and it was kind of like, that's done at this point. Aldeguer looked quicker, he's now back in front. He should be able to pull away, but Canet does the fastest lap with like a few laps to go, I think. Well, he did that to get back on the back of him. I can't remember how many laps to go, but I do remember he did the fastest lap quite late on. It's like a new lap record or something. Well, not or something, it was a new lap record because of the new surface and the grippier tyres. Obviously, that was going to sort of always go away. It was like 2 seconds quicker as well. Like, they were so much faster than any like of the Dunlop races before. It was crazy. But yeah, then Canet overtook Aldeguer. Like I said, I was surprised to see that into the Miller corner. Then we knew at that point it was going down to MG. Aldeguer had been so strong in there all race. He passed Lopez there. He passed Canet there already, I think, previously as well. And it's a signature kind of move. It's the kind of move he tried to pull on Shu back at like Aragon and just completely careened to the side of him, which pretty much almost happened again on this last lap. He went for the move. He was sort of enough alongside, but then he kind of lost the front, went into Canet a little bit. They basically both ran right to the edge of the track. Not that Canet really had much choice. Then, as they're pretty much level, Canet then runs off the circuit, so over the curb onto the tarmac runoff. Aldeguer goes through and takes the win. In terms of whether that was fair, it was just about borderline, because I think Canet could have stayed on the track. He picked up and ran off, but I think he could have just about leant on him and stayed on the circuit, or at least ran on the curb, which obviously would have been better than going completely off the circuit, and he might have had a chance to be on a bit of a bodged line into the penultimate turn and pick him up or something. We obviously have already seen this season as well that you can get away with forcing somebody off the track on the last lap. We obviously saw it back in the second Mazzano with Bastianini and Martin, which was probably more egregious. There was a much bigger contact there. So, yeah, they kind of showed that you're allowed to get away with that on the last lap because, you know, it's just how it is. I mean, sure, if you completely ram someone from miles back, they probably would do something about it. But, yeah, they let it get away. Canet didn't seem too bothered, actually, in his interview. Usually you'd see the other guy moaning quite a bit or waving their arms, but they shook hands straight away. Canet didn't seem too fussed. He seemed happy that he'd had a go and had a good battle. Aldeguer was obviously chuffed because he'd finally won another race again. Everybody seemed happy. No penalty was given. Seems to be probably the right way to go. I'm sure there's probably people on Twitter that are not very happy, but people on Twitter are never happy, so, you know, just ignore them.
Yeah, I've only seen it once or twice, but I felt. So you say there that you reckon he could have kept on track. I don't actually think it is, because I feel it's like he gets hit like multiple times when. So we get to the point where they're going down into MG. He goes for the inside. There's a first bit of contact. Then it looks like Aldeguer kind of almost loses the front and then tries to pick the bike up. Then there's like a second and third. And at one point, I'm genuinely think the handlebars have been pulled out of Cannon's hand. So I'm at my first initial thought was has to be penalties. Absolutely just bumped him multiple times and run him off the track. But I was so surprised they both stayed on from watching it live. I just felt like bang, they're going to go down. There's been a collision here, and then it was kind of like the Alex Marquez Pecco thing where the bikes looked like they were just getting stuck together and they were going to go down together. So they were both lucky. If Canet was happy enough after the race, you can't really argue if it's a penalty or not, because if it's egregious enough that it could be any way overturned, you would have known straight away Canet would have been absolutely giving it socks trying to get the results overturned. But if he was pretty much content with the result and that it was a fair move, can't really argue with it. Again, it is last lap. It is a hairpin downhill.
He didn't really mention the pass either way, so it wasn't like he sat there and said it was fair, but
yeah,
I think he would have complained.
If you were unhappy, you would have said something, because the tempers run pretty high on the podium, especially if you've been if you're something like that has happened and you feel hard done by, definitely think he would have mentioned it. So the fact he didn't say anything kind of for me probably means he was okay with it. Again, if we start penalising every last lap overtake, there'll be no races will be won on the last lap. Everything will be overturned and it won't be good for the sport. But it was a good race, and again I was really surprised as well the fact that they managed to can't manage to re-overtake him, because that was the big surprise of the last lap, not the little incident they had. But I thought as soon as Aldeguer started the last lap in the lead, I was like, yeah, this is done. I was like, this isn't, no way he's going to do it. And then he passed him and I was like, oh, he's going to get something. And it's like there's one or two corners here where he's going to get a speed up into the side of the leg, and in the end it was MG, which is the main turning point. Now someone else who was on the podium, Senna Aegis. What a brilliant race. We talked already about Kelso and Moto 3 leading for a small bit in his race, but what a brilliant race from the 19-year-old. Every time I see him, he looks about 30. I don't get how he's so young. Every time I see him on the grid, he just looks like a couple of years younger than Simona Corsi. It's just, I don't get it. He just looks old to me. Every time I hear that he's 19, I'm like, that just looks... You
wouldn't ID him, would you?
No, yeah, exactly. You would not. He just looks like, if you told me he had like 2 kids, I'd be like, I can say that. He just looks old to me, and it just does weird, because like, even though I know he's young, because I see his name, like, yeah, I know he looks old to me. I don't really rate him that much, but he probably is the next big Australian superstar coming through, because realistically he'll probably be the next one to make it into the GP class. Like, realistically, Jack is probably gone at the end of next year, and then if Senna can keep up this sort of strong form and building in his first full season in the class, he'll be definitely on the shopping carts for a couple of MotoGP teams next year. But brilliant podium today, had real good speed, and we've seen sparkles already this year from him, but he hasn't put a full season together, which is very difficult in Moto 2. But a podium at home, his first podium as well. What a day for the Aussie.
Yeah, really good day for him. And yeah, I mean, I didn't even know he was 19 till today, till they said on the commentary. So yeah, I was as surprised as you were. But yeah, I mean, he's kind of shown signs all season of being like, towards at the start of the season he was kind of towards the back, which you kind of expect. Then he had a couple of rounds that were quite good. I can't remember how much we talked about him on the podcast in Sachsenring, but that was the first race where I really thought, wow, he's really showing something, because he was fighting sort of towards the sharp end, sort of top 5, back end of the top 10, I suppose, the whole race. And I think he slowly faded because he ran out of tyre. Another tyre race, so maybe does show. I think, did he come through a bit of Catalonia as well when the tyres were going off? So clearly he's got a bit of sort of skill in saving those tyres. Obviously, we saw him very briefly. So we saw him last year. He did a few stand-ins for Sam Lowe's. I think he did some. Did he do a couple of stand-ins the year before? Obviously, he was racing in European Moto 2. I think he won it, didn't he, last year? He won the championship. And yeah, it was. He's kind of just been showing all season. He's been building. He's been getting closer. And again, you have some anonymous rounds, but it's Moto 2 rookie season. You're going to have that. You know, it's pretty rare you get a really fantastic rookie season like Raul Fernandez or Marc Marquez. Like, there's literally like 2 of those ever, pretty much. So, yeah, solid season, I think, so far. Getting a first podium in his first year, a lot of riders don't do that. And it was also not particularly weird circumstances. It was in a way that obviously the tyre wear was high, but it wasn't like a weird wet race. Wasn't like loads of people fell off in front of him. One person fell off in front of him. That's pretty standard in a race. If you're battling towards the front, it's quite likely that someone will crash. So, yeah, really good ride from him. Wearing his Stoner replica helmet as well. So I'm sure Casey liked to see that one. I'm sure he was happy to do it at home. And yeah, I hope we can see him more at the sharp end because he's in a good solid team. The Intact GP team's always been good. I think it's probably even been raised a step since it's had the Husqvarna money sort of put into it. Is it Gonzalez alongside him here there next season? So a bit more of an experienced rider to perhaps learn a little bit from. Because obviously Darren Binder, his teammate at the moment, you think of him obviously as quite experienced, but in terms of Moto2, not particularly. It's only his second season in Moto2, so yeah, he's probably not going to have a huge amount of experience. But Gonzalez has been around a few more years in the Moto2 class, race winner. So I think, yeah, we could potentially see him learning a bit more from Manu as well next year and then pushing each other on. I think we could see him up there, probably getting a few more podiums. Maybe he could win a race. Obviously, it depends how it goes. I mean, I suppose anyone in the field can win a race if the conditions are right. Well, maybe not the Ford guys, but that's more down to equipment than the riders. But yeah, it was a really, really well-ridden race for him, really mature. Caught and passed Iagora as well. So yeah, he absolutely earned it, and I was really chuffed to see him on the podium.
Yeah, and you do mention there the Stoner replica, so an extra little nod to Casey Stoner. And yeah, he's in a good team. He's had I suppose a decent first season in Grand Prix level, and I do hope to see him kick on next year again. He is staying with that team, and again, we would say that's obviously not the top tier team, but it's definitely one of the teams you can see maybe an outside championship challenge coming from him, maybe in a couple of years if he can build into a top rider. But it's great to see a young Australian that doesn't look that young get on the podium today. It was nice to see. And when we get these, usually the flyaway races, more often than not, we get a nice kind of fairy tale ride. And I think that was it today where we saw someone at their home race get their first podium in their rookie year. So yeah, even though it's probably not been the season he wanted, a podium at Australia would definitely have been something he would have taken at the start of the year. So I'm sure that will kind of give him the boost for the rest of the season. He'll go into the winter then with his head held high. And yeah, it's been another good weekend, and he's showing promise. So let's see how far he can go. Now, to finish off, Moto2 Championship is pretty much done. Iagora needs 10 points from the last, the next race. So it's nailed on really. In this race, Garcia dropped from 2nd to 4th in the championship. He's now behind Canet. He might even be down to 5th at one point because behind Canet, Aldeguer was kind of near him as well at some points, and a lower pace as well. So yeah,
Even Lopez crashed, so he stayed in front of him.
So yeah, he kind of stayed ahead of Lopez, but shows that we've tried for the last 6 weeks probably to big up how he can maybe get himself back into it. It's just he keeps falling down the order. He's turned. It's just his season needs to end. I think if he could even give him right now to just finish the season and go take an extended winter break, I'd say he'd nearly take it, just because the fact is he just needs to get away from it and go for a reset, because we've seen what this can happen. Is how long is it taking for Arbolino to kind of get back towards the front? You could still argue he's not back at the front yet. He's another one where you have these good purple patches, you're in line for a GP spot, you're going to be a Moto2 champion, then you turn out to be a very average Moto2 rider for a year and a half, 2 years. So it's he needs to hit the reset button, Garcia. But championship, it's done. Is there, I'm going to ask you anyway, is there any way he can't win it? Is it going to be down to, it's obviously down to Iagora, like it's down to mechanical or injury for me, but he needs a very basic enough result out of a track you would imagine he goes quite well at in the Birmingham. So for me, it's 100% done, and I have that in the notes here. So I don't think we'll have differing opinions, but I will throw it across to you anyway.
No, he's not going to lose it because he doesn't even have to do anything anymore, because no one's going to win the last 3 races, and if it's anyone, it's not going to be Canet. So, and that's the guy that's second in the championship. So yeah, he literally has to score 10 points. So as long as he actually doesn't even need to turn up, really, he's going to win it. I mean, I guess I said no one could win it. I could see Aldeguer doing all 3 like he did last year, and how has he got himself back up to 3rd in the championship, or is he like 4th? There's like 1 point or something between like him, Canet, and Garcia. How has Aldeguer done that after the season he's had? It's crazy. Like he just, it's such a weird season. I know they're so far behind Agora, and that's why. But you think about how much we expected Aldeguer to just dominate, and then like at one point he's like down in like 6th, like absolutely miles off the championship, and then he could still quite feasibly finish 2nd. I think he probably will now. That's pretty crazy that he's managed to do that. It almost, there's all the question marks mid-season about whether he should be promoted to MotoGP, but if he's going to end up finishing second in the championship. But yeah, I don't think 1-2 from Moto2 going up to MotoGP is really bad. I guess Chantra's really the standout in terms of should he have been promoted, but again was obviously absent this weekend. But yeah, cannot see that championship being taken away from Igor now. There's nothing that anyone can really do about it. It's as long as he turns up, he's fine, and clearly the pressure's not getting to him too much because he still had a decent race today. Yeah, it wasn't his best, but he still was second Bosco in the race, so it's not too bad. To be fair, the other one obviously won, but was the one in front of him obviously won. He obviously beat his teammate again like he needed to. Still extended his lead because Lopez was the guy that was closest to him as well. So he obviously gained points on Garcia, gained points on Lopez. Yes, he lost points to Canet and to Aldeguer, but because of how inconsistent their seasons have been, they're not really a threat. And yeah, I think he's just going to coast it home. I think he'll pretty easily wrap it up in the next round, and it'll just be MotoGP to go in terms of championships that are up to play for.
Yeah, and I actually had to look at the championships to make sure that I didn't somehow add Aldeguer into P4 in the championship, but he is level with Sergio Garcia on 175 points. He's 1 point currently behind Aaron Canet, and he's 12 ahead of his teammate. So, if you remember through the season, like Joe Roberts was at 1 point leading the championship. He's now at 153 points. He's nearly 100 points off. He's had, ever since he kind of got that, he got stumped for that.
He was out, wasn't he, as well? He hurt himself in practice.
Saturday morning, I think literally first lap out broke something, his wrist or his shoulder or his collarbone, one of the MotoGP rider bingo parts to break. But like you mentioned Samket Chantra there, where do you think he is in the championship and how many points? I had to do a lot of scrolling to find him.
Just like 75.
Not a bad guess, I'll give you that. 78. What position?
Oh, that's a 12th.
13th and 78. That's
so close.
So
but
close.
It kind of shows you that his season hasn't been very good when you can guess that closely.
And just for reference, I'm looking at the guys around him. He's behind Jeremy Alcoba, someone I don't rate at all, unfortunately.
Someone that's going towards Supersport.
Exactly. He is 15 points ahead of a guy we were just talking about how he's a rookie, Senna Aegis. He's only 2 positions ahead of him. So like,
it's crazy.
It's
Aegis could probably beat him because
realistically,
although Chantra could turn up and win next round. Let's face it, it's time.
if he was race fit, maybe, but I don't think that will happen. Just because I don't think he will be race fit is the sad thing. To be honest, I don't think he'll be able to have a good end to the season. But yeah, I could see Aegis taking that off him, and that just doesn't.
Who else
look
is
good
around him? Let's see
Darren
who else.
Binder, Marcus Ramirez is another few points ahead. And then
he's had quite a poor season actually, hasn't he? Because remember last year he jumped on the American racing bike at like the second half of the season, and he got like a podium. He was battling top 5 pretty much every weekend, and I haven't seen him once this season except from when he passed Roberts, and then Roberts high-sided trying to go out past him.
Yeah, he looked really promising. I suppose start of
not a Pirelli fan, I would say.
Maybe it
really
must be something in it
Dunlops
because this year has just not been for him. But he's in P11, 80 points, and then the next rider is Dixon, who's had a really rough last few weeks because he's 10th and he's over 100 points off now. He's been Arbolino, Vietti, Roberts, Gonzalez, Lopez, like all these guys that at one point in this year I was saying he looks like favourite for maybe to give Iogora a run in, and it just shows how inconsistent everyone has been. The fact that Iogora he's not been winning races and dominating. He's been at the front. He's been taking big points every week. The fact Canet and Aldeguer are going to be the guys that are second or third. I've already ruled out that Garcia will probably finish, I'm going to say 6th. Looking at these, Gonzalez is on good form. Alonso Lopez is fast everywhere he goes to him. And Aldeguer, probably at the moment, at this point of this season, he's going to probably be fast for the remaining races. Canet, as I was watching the race today, and as much as we give him a lot of stick on the podcast, he's had a good year. He's had a couple.
He just went missing in the middle. He was good at the start.
Yeah.
Then he's been really good at the end. And I remember, he won at Portimao. He was leading was he leading the championship briefly, or was right up there?
He was right up there. I don't know if he led.
He was nowhere near the front. But then obviously since basically Mazzano or Aragon, where he crashed on that first lap, but he was looking quick. He's been basically the fastest rider really at every track.
Yeah. It's just I think we gave him a really bad time for the Mazzano rolling off around the outside thing. That killed me. And he could bad, though. Probably, that was bad. He probably could have had 5 race wins this year, which coming into the year having never won the big monkey on his back, That would have been an amazing feat. Now, of course, he still had a miles a good season to be currently sat second in the world race wins this year. So
it's best season so far, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, I think also it's been a bit of a strange season, maybe a weaker field as well, but
potentially
still, yeah.
But it's just looking at the championship standings. It's just really shows that like it's been a season completely made up of mistakes.
Yeah, it has been. I mean, like you were saying about like Chantra and Dixon. I mean, Dixon must have literally DNF'd in almost 10 races. So that's like half the season.
So the one championship that's actually still somewhat on, you could argue that it's getting to a point now where it's at, I would say, a bit of a tipping point. It's a sprint. Martin bolted. We had kind of rough weather all weekend, so dry running time wasn't there, which I think really affects Pecco. I'll probably get to that later, but we didn't have a race weekend where we had great, consistent weather conditions. We had weather conditions that were up and down where you would favour a Marc Marquez to kind of make the difference come Sunday, which again we'll get to because all these points seem to add up. But in the sprint, we're surprised to see Martin head down, gone, good luck, thanks for coming? Or was there ever anything else that was going to happen for him in the sprint?
Well, it's his typical strategy, and obviously as we saw last year, it's his typical Phillip Island strategy as well. So, no, in that aspect, not so surprised, but I didn't realise he was that much faster than everybody else, really. I didn't think he would pull away in the way that he did in the sprint race, but yeah, he pretty much did it perfectly. He did what he did last year at Phillip Island in the main race, till obviously his tyre went, and as we've seen him do quite a lot of times, he's taken the lead in the sprint and sort of controlled it. Not seen it maybe as much this year, and especially not the second half of this year. He's done it at the odd time, but seems to be more like he's kind of just focusing on picking up the points. But I think he kind of knew coming into this weekend his lead had been chipped down to 10 points. He kind of needed to strike back, have a good weekend, and well, that's absolutely what he did. He was on pole? I think, yeah, he was on pole. So again, he did show that he had some fantastic pace over everybody else. Like you were saying as well, I think it favours him more when the conditions are a bit strange, because I think he can go basically from first lap in FP1, he's on it, whereas like Bagnaia, he builds up over Friday, builds up over the free practice on Saturday, puts a good lap in, even builds up still during the sprint a lot of the times if it's not one of his favourite tracks, and then come race day he's sort of on it. But I think the lack of like a track timer sort of seemed to cost him. It cost, I think, Bastianini a lot as well, so maybe it's also a little bit to do with how that team goes about working and how those engineers like to crunch the data. Maybe sometimes they focus a little bit too much on the data than the rider feel. But yeah, to actually bring it back to Martin, which obviously was the point rather than about the Lenovo team, yeah, was pretty much what you kind of expected he'd try to do, but I didn't expect him to pull away by that much, to be fair. It was very, very impressive.
Yeah, and he really showed that he probably is the fastest rider outright. You still would probably put Marquez down as the fastest guy, but just with the package difference at the moment, I don't think there's anyone in the world that is as fast as Jorge Martin on that bike. As much as Pecco tries, I think Pecco's probably the better mathematician and he's better racer and probably overall, but in terms of one lap and just straight up outright speed, there's not really anyone in the world better than Jorge Martin. And again, he kind of proved that in the sprint on Saturday. Didn't make any mistakes. Now Marquez did probably give him a bit of a scare with his pace, and obviously he had a rough turn one where he couldn't disengage his right head device, so he ran massively wide, but had a great performance back. But it was kind of typical Martin, really. He's taken everything he's learned from last year and he's just so much better this year, I think. As much as we talked about this as a season of mistakes, I look at Pecco as the guy who's been made all mistakes. I know Jorge Martin's made a few, but like he's made nowhere near as many as Pecco has. And
Pecco's won like 8 Grand Prix and like 8 sprints. He's won like the most of everything and is still 20 points off the lead. I think that tells you everything.
Yeah, exactly.
You need to know
how inconsistent he's been and how many mistakes there's been, because like really the champ should be wrapped up. And like I saw a statement, again we'll kind of come to Pecco a bit later and talk more about his weekend, but I saw a statement today from him where he said the deficit is due to the Alex Marquez crash in Aragon. And like, fair enough, look, yeah, you lost points that day, like, but what about the other 1 million crashes you had? Like, are they not to blame either? Like, so that was probably
about 2 race weekends later where you crashed out of 3rd place.
Yeah, so it's just it's a difficult season to call, but we're getting down to the point now where someone's going to have to take it and run with it. And I think Martin, most weekends, looks the faster rider. He looks more consistent, and he looks like there's just less noise around him as a rider. I feel like every weekend there's something with Peckham. Again, like I said for the millionth time, we will get to him later, because there is kind of, again, apparently he turned the whole bike upside down on Sunday morning to get a different setup because he wasn't happy after the sprint. You don't hear anything like that with Martin. Martin just seems settled. He seems like he has everything he needs to win this championship, and as of right now, I think he is definitely the favourite. But we did mention there Marquez had a very good comeback. We'll probably say that again in a minute. His sprint comeback again just shows why he is on the way to, at the moment, right? If you could pick two riders out of Pecco, Martin and Mark, would you pick Pecco over Martin to be alongside Marquez next year? As they stand at the moment, I'd be probably thinking Pecco be the one you drop, to be brutally honest, but I'd like to see what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if you look at it on the basis of this season, you absolutely would. But also you have to remember that he is the two-time champion, so like just having this, I mean, we say a slightly rough season, he's still won like 8 races and all this stuff. Yes, he's made some mistakes, but not everything was his fault. I mean, it's a bit cheap to say it was all Alex Marquez's fault, especially when Martin then did what he did in the next race with the pit stop and stuff. But if that hadn't have happened, obviously he would have more points, and he would still be second, but he would be a lot closer. Obviously there was also some other incidents that weren't his fault, so it's not all entirely down to him. But yeah, I think if you look at it on pure on paper, then absolutely you would probably pick those two. I think Ducati probably, I mean, I suppose having Marc Marquez is just so much of a weapon. You don't care about who you lose, but I'm sure that there'll be people in Ducati that are disappointed they're losing Martin. And not just for the fact that he might take the number 1 so Aprilia. Obviously, they're all going to dislike that. But I think there'll be some that are thinking, this guy's really good. It's a shame that we've let him go. But it's just the way the cookie crumbles. I mean, even Bastianini as well, really, it's tricky because there's 4 very, very good riders there that you kind of trying to fit into 2 spots. I think the fact that Pramac left them in the lurch a little bit too, because there are 2 seats down now as well. And yeah, I think obviously in an ideal world, Ducati were going to try and get Marquez to Pramac, which would make them stay, and then they'd keep everybody, but it just hasn't really worked out that way. But I think, yeah, probably I agree. I think if you're going to, on the basis of this season, you'd absolutely pick those 2. But also, once you've got Marc Marquez, doesn't matter, because he, on that bike, is probably just going to beat them both anyway.
Pretty good answer. I like the thinking behind it, but yeah, I think as of right now, I think Pecco's in a. He's. I suppose we might as well talk about Pecco, because I'll throw back to you
we've basically spent the whole Martin point talking about Pecco, so we may as well actually move to
and
Pecco.
Then I threw it onto the Marquez comeback in the sprint, and we're still somehow talking about Pecco, so we'll put Pecco away. We won't mention Pecco again until we get to him in the sentence. But Mark's comeback in the sprint, take it away, Rhys. So we do know that the right-eye device did not disengage as he went into turn 1, hence when he went wide. After that, then he just did his typical get out of my way, I'm faster kind of routine, didn't he?
I thought he almost hit Martin. That's what he said. He said Martin aggressively braked to disengage his ride-out device, and Mark had to avoid him, and the wind blew him wide. That's what he said.
Oh, well, I misheard that, or else I read that he had his own either way, ban ride-out devices. So
yeah,
whatever the true
trying
story
to blame
is.
ride-out devices. He basically said he made a mistake, is what he said in the little car they take to the sprint podium. Anyway, it doesn't matter what happened. He ran wide the first corner, and then he had to come back through. This circuit, obviously being so much more of a rider's circuit, you can make the difference. The ride-out device is not used much here. That's the big difference between a lot of the field, right? If we actually just break it down. The GP24, yes, it's obviously got a better engine than the GP23, but the big difference of why it gets off the corner so much better is a lot down to the ride-out device. Obviously, the engine, is different, but it's only so much more. And obviously, again, a lot of that's electronics, but you can kind of take the electronics from the 24, the settings, and put them in the 23 if you wanted to get more similar. So you can see it's a mechanical difference, and that's the ride-out device that makes that big difference. We've even seen it 23 versus 22 as well. Remember last year, Qatar, Digi Antonio versus Bagnaia. Every time at the last corner, Bagnaia would just gap him. That's always the big difference. And you look at the Ducatis, it's the extra devices. It's also why the Honda's struggling so well. It's not the only reason why the Honda's struggling so much, but it's one of their bigger weaknesses.
7.
And they seemed more on the pace this weekend. Yeah, the result might not show it, but all of them seemed better than just Zarco, as it typically is. But anyway, back to the point itself. That meant Marquez wasn't at such a disadvantage, although against the KTMs and Aprilias anyway, he doesn't really have that disadvantage because that bike is pretty much on par with those, because they're still probably not as good as the 23 bike from last year. But yeah, he fought his way through really, really well. One of those circuits where you can make the difference. The right device doesn't play into it as much. A circuit, again, left-handers as well, always plays into his strength. He was so good through that last corner. We saw it in the main race as well, probably more, when he was behind the person that shall not be mentioned until we get to his section. He was doing the corner. To be honest, he looked like he's doing the corner just totally wrong. I don't know if you thought about it. Maybe we'll talk about that when we get to the main race. But he was losing so much time every time out of there, and he was getting such a good run on him. But he was doing the same thing in the sprint, got back up into that position in the end. And yeah, I mean, it's not that many races where you see him mixing with the 24s, let alone making a mistake coming back, passing the 24s. And then, yeah, okay, he couldn't catch up to Martin. He gave it a go. He did put some inroads into him. But yeah, it was a fantastic comeback. One we've seen a few times. Seen it at Austria. We've seen it, well, if I list every one way he's come from the back. His qualifying's not been good, has it? So it's something we've seen a lot this year. But for once, he qualified well, but he just made a mistake at the start. It was fantastic. And again, just kind of shows how he's sort of the best rider on the grid, to be honest. He's still got it when he needs to. I mean, some of his best races have been comebacks. Let's not forget, until the crash, Jerez 2020, how good that was. Okay, maybe it wasn't as good as a comeback of that, of course, but even still, he's always been shown that he can pass people at will. He's just got that extra little bit of skill. Maybe his outright pace isn't as good, I think, as Martin's sometimes. But in terms of everything else, he just has the package of everybody on the grid.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, there is very little else to say about Mark, because he then proved it again on Sunday, being able to do the exact same thing. But we will finally get to Pecco. And to be honest, at this point, I've forgotten everything I had to say about him. But Pecco's weekend was poor. First thing for me, came into the weekend in the press conference kind of saying that 2 second places would be a good result. That doesn't sound like a guy who's mentally ready to take this championship fight to Martin. I never heard Rossi come in against Lorenzo going, if I can just not lose to him, or if I can just lose to him by enough points that I can don't go too far behind. Just seems.
Did you watch the press conferences as a child, though?
That's very true. That's very true. That is a great point. But surely.
They would probably admit it on a Saturday after qualifying. Yeah, they probably wouldn't come and say
exactly.
it on Thursday.
But coming into the weekend already thinking that you're defeated, it was a weird one for me, to be honest. I just would particularly be saying that. I wouldn't be giving Jorge Martin that kind of psychological edge. So it was just a weird one. Again, he didn't really have much all weekend. He was very weak in the sprint. His main race, when Marquez passed him, when Marquez was riding pillion with him and basically gave him a little nudge along. His pace wasn't that good. Was he like 5 seconds off at the end? He absolutely had nothing.
They gapped him.
He had nothing. It's like, we're talking about Pecco. Like, what's Pecco's strongest track? It's probably Mugello, fast and flowing, or Assen, fast and flowing. It's very strange. He doesn't seem to go well here, considering his very first good result on that GP 19 was back here in Phillip Island. He went really strong, and that's where he first kind of blew onto the street, blew up as a GP rider, you could say. But again, all weekend looks like he just wasn't that strong. Got a decent qualifying, managed to get a good result out of it. Again, he's still just about does enough most weekends, but like, it's nearly a full Sunday's race deficit now. He needs to claw back, and Martin was quicker than him in Birmingham last year. So, like, I think the next round we go to is the biggest one of the season so far, because if Martin takes more points out of him, I think Martin will win it comfortably at this point, because at the moment it looks like Pecco just doesn't have anything to fight with him.
Yeah, he was quite weak. I mean, he wasn't even on the podium in the sprint. That's kind of the surprise, isn't it? I mean, you would expect him to be there week in, week out. I mean, frankly, the GP24 is so good that there's 4 of them, so you would think they'd be thrown on the podium, and Morbidelli doesn't factor himself in most rounds anyway. So usually it's pretty much a guaranteed podium, unless there's somebody on a slower bike doing a bit better, and that's kind of what happens. Marquez usually knocks one of the GP24s off the podium. It's usually Bastianini, but on this occasion it was Bagnaia. Main race, still wasn't great. I mean, I think it's a bit harsh to say he had a terrible weekend, because he was still miles ahead of the rest of the field. Yes, he got gapped by Martin and Marquez, but Martin and Marquez were running so much faster than everybody else. Bagnaia was like 7 seconds clear of the rest of the field as well. So he also, if they weren't there, you would be like, oh my god, he dominated so much. He was like 7 seconds clear. I know that isn't how it works, but he still clearly had some good pace. He was much quicker than Bastianini this weekend. He was much quicker than Morbidelli, which I know, yeah, okay, maybe I shouldn't be comparing him to them, but if you're saying same equipment, now I think, yeah, if you get some other riders on the GP24, he perhaps doesn't finish third today, because he clearly didn't have the pace of, but even the pace of the 23 bike, did he? So, yeah, and Di Giannantonio was catching him up a lot at the end. But still on the podium, I mean, that's what you got to do. When it's not your weekend, you've got to maximise the results. I think the only thing he didn't maximise was the sprint by finishing fourth. I mean, he wasn't as fast as Marquez this weekend. He wasn't as fast as Martin this weekend. So he took the best position he could. He didn't help himself in qualifying because he didn't qualify that well. So to come through a little bit, I mean, it wasn't a terrible qualifying, but you know, it wasn't on the front row or anything. So that always puts you a little bit further back. But yeah, he just didn't have anything to fight with, did he? I mean, he was going, like I said, he was going to that last corner. He didn't get the drive compared to Marquez. I mean, looked to me like he was just doing the turn wrong. I mean, it's not fair to say that, but Marquez was taking one line. Martin was taking basically the same line. You saw that difference in acceleration was not there with Martin. So it just seemed like Bagnaia just wasn't super comfortable. And like you say, it's weird because this has been a good track for him in the past. It's fast and flowing like his other best tracks, but he just didn't seem to have it. But to be fair, he didn't crash, which I know is probably not a high bar to set, but they have done it, both of them, a lot this season. He got the points he could get, and yeah, he's still 20 points off. That is a lot, but 2 races a weekend now, that can be done much easier. Also can be done with 2 wins if the other guy's third place, and if Marc Marquez is up there now, that can be done. So the crucial thing is that Martin didn't win today, because if Martin had won, I think Martin could finish second to him in every race to the end and still beat him, which obviously wouldn't have been good at all for Pecco, but just managed to hang on to that. But he's definitely going to have to strike back at Buriram if he's going to have any chance to win this championship, because it just doesn't seem like Martin has these weak tracks like Bagnaia does. There might be tracks where Bagnaia is better than Martin, but Martin will finish second, whereas Bagnaia does seem some weekends, like at Mandalika, for example, like here, where he just turns up the track, doesn't really gel with it, and struggles. Whereas you have races like Motogp, where he is ridiculously good, so it's better than everybody else, but Martin is second to him. So yeah, just it wasn't a great weekend, but I think it's a bit harsh to say it was terrible, because he got the most out of it I think he could have feasibly done.
Yeah, you're probably right in saying that it's probably a bit harsh on him, and again, it's probably, if you take it the weekend as a whole, his weekend is decent enough for him, but in the position he is at the moment, he needs to be taking points off Martin, and I think it was a terrible weekend to be behind Martin and Marquez in both main race and sprint, and he never really showed like he had anything for either of them. He reminded me of Davi this weekend, and that's probably harsh to say, just because I felt like
that's harsh on both of them.
Yeah.
That's like using Dovi as an insult and then comparing Bagnaia to Dovi.
It's just the way I looked at it is just he's on the best bike on the grid. He's not doing much else in the most of the track, but he just holds people up at the moment. That's what I felt like that weekend. And again, that sounds really bad, but just remember when Marcus got to him, he was breaking late going into turn 1, and Marcus was quick wherever else, and eventually Martin makes a mistake. Pecco, in the main race, Pecco passes him, and then they both pass him, and then he ends up third. And then that was his race done. There was nothing else. For maybe 4 laps, he kind of flirted with, I'm in the battle. And then another 4 laps later, he's taking the last corner wrong still, somehow. For me, the last corner is a weird one, because obviously we play a lot of bike games, so playing online, you play with people with different lines and stuff.
We know how to take Philip Island.
Exactly.
We play GP bikes.
Literally,
just
yeah,
take
exactly.
it from us.
That should be the intro to the podcast. But like the last corner, like if he's gaining that much on entry, fair enough, Marcus is good in the left-handers, but like he was gaining so much and then not losing anything on the exit. And then when he was behind Martin, he maybe gained half a tenth. There was no difference. Like their line was the same. It was more standard. So something Pecco was doing, he looked like he was apexing slightly too early, and then he had to kind of hesitate and pick the bike up. Because even Hodgson called it on TNT, where he was behind one of the VR46 bikes. It would have been Bezecchi. No, Bezecchi at the long lap. Must have been... Was he behind Digi at some point? No, it would have been Bezecchi before the long lap, I think. But the last corner from the helicopter shot, you can just see he apexes and gets on the power twirly, goes wide, and doesn't have to shut the throttle, but just doesn't have any run from it. So,
was it Bezecchi in the sprint, like in front of Vinales?
No, this was the main race because it was like the end of lap 1. And like coming out of the last car, and it goes to a helicopter shot, and you see Pecco. He just picks up the power too early, gets out onto the curb, and just doesn't do anything with the just runs out a road more than gets a run on him. And Hodgson's like, "Oh no, that's all wrong."
Oh, it was when he was behind Bezzecchi. Yeah, it was.
So
Bezzecchi was second, wasn't he, on the first lap?
Yeah,
it was like the same as the sprint. Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. But it just shows that like he was clearly giving away time in that last corner, and it's worrying that if we can see it from the TV, that a world champion is giving away that much time in one corner. Oh no, it's hard enough track, but still, I don't think we should ever get to see that much of a difference just on the TV. You can see a lot at the side of a track because you can see a lot more of the nuances, but yeah, I could physically see a lot on TV, and I know obviously you called it as well that he just looked like he wasn't taking the corner kind of traditionally, but it was it was just a weird one for him, but yeah, it was just overall it was a bit of a weird weekend. We did mention there Vinales and Bezzecchi. We are going to move now to that one in the sprint. Into turn 1, Vinales slipstream past Bezzecchi, and unfortunately Bezzecchi ends up running into the back of Vinales, and they both spear off the track at about 190 miles an hour. So very scary incident. Thankfully both were okay. Apparently Salvadori got hit by some debris a couple of seconds later. Don't know how that works, but he also got slightly injured from it. He said he had like nerve damage in his arm, so crazy how that happened. But as the Vinales fan in the podcast, do you agree with him deleting all his social medias and basically telling two different stories according to Bezzecchi?
I haven't heard that, so I don't know.
So Bezzecchi said that he talked to him after the incident in the medical room. He was like, "Yeah, it's all grand," and he said he got back to his motorhome, and an hour later he said a lot of reporters were saying that Vinales was blaming him for everything, and he said this is not what Vinales had said to him. He said he just told him two different stories. So that's where that's coming from, but
maybe he hadn't seen the replay yet.
Maybe
when he spoke to the journalist, he had seen the replay.
Potentially, yeah, maybe.
Yeah. But anyway, the actual incident itself, yeah, of course, it was Vinales had been trying for a couple of laps to pass Bezzecchi. It was actually very similar to Marquez behind Bagnaia, really, that he'd get the run, he'd gain so much on him out the corner, and as soon as he pulled out the slipstream, he basically just hit a wall, couldn't get close, and then by the time they got to the braking points, the guy was gaining, because I thought that with Pecco, they were saying, oh, he's gaining on the brakes, which he was, but Marquez was basically falling back after pulling out the slipstream anyway, so that was stopping him from getting level and actually pulling the pass, because you can't outbrake from behind, really, when it's someone as good as Pecco on the brakes. And same with Bezzecchi. Bezzecchi seemed to be very strong too, and I don't think Maverick's exactly known for being really good on the brakes. So, yeah, he tried it a couple of times before. He got the run on this particular lap. He basically did the pass completely on the slipstream, and then sort of comes back for the racing line. Was enough room. Didn't seem to cut it off too much. Obviously, there is always that risk, but you know, it seemed like he'd been reasonable. Bezzecchi kind of seemed to try and take an aggressive stance. You see he was on the outside of the track, then sort of tried to follow in. Then it looks to me like he got stuck in the aero wake, to be honest, gets basically sucked into the back of Vinales. You can see how much brake he puts on, because he does a stoppie, trying to avoid the back of Maverick's rear. Unfortunately, he doesn't do that, takes them both out, both flinging through the gravel. Bezzecchi looks down on the floor, looks a bit injured. Vinales gets up and flags him anyway. That was the end of that. Then obviously, I hadn't heard this about what he said to Bezzecchi, but I saw the interview where he was saying that basically Bezzecchi didn't brake and used him as a berm, and if he doesn't get a penalty for this, then that's what I'm going to do next time, which seems counterproductive because Bezzecchi also crashed, so maybe not like
I'll do that next time. Maverick Vinales, ladies and gentlemen, which was his Instagram bio for a while.
Yeah. Which interesting, because it means you're also still going to not finish. So, but I get what he was probably trying to say, that I guess he felt like he hadn't braked. But I mean, Bezzecchi clearly did brake because his rear wheel came off the ground. So I'm not sure what he exactly meant by that. Maybe he thought initially he didn't brake. I find it tough to call in terms of whether there should have been a penalty. I was surprised to hear there was one, because I kind of expected there wouldn't be. By the sounds of it, it was initially going to be a double on that penalty. The VR46 team provided data to say that Bezzecchi did brake. They provided the braking data, the suspension data, all this different stuff, which can show obviously how much he got sucked in. And they seemed to then say, okay, having looked at that, we'll say it's a single long lap. So it's kind of as if they're like, well, he still caused the crash from being the rider behind, which to an extent is true. If you're the rider behind, you have to be careful, because he's the one that can avoid the incident. Yes, he gets probably sucked into the air a little bit, but he puts himself in that position to have that happen, because you see he gets past. You can see he kind of almost gives up, but then he decides to chuck it into the corner really aggressively, all of a sudden, like as if he's going to try and get the run, and that's when all of a sudden he then just starts gaining on him. We have heard this before from VR46 riders, that Vinales does break a little bit strange, so maybe, again, he is strange to follow, but at the same time, it's your responsibility to avoid the incident. It's tough to say. We've seen it happen there before. It does sometimes happen that you close up. I think it's harsh to give a penalty, but I can kind of accept it. I can say fair enough. He was the rider behind and was in their responsibility to avoid it. And I think he could have prevented the incident from happening. I think the incident itself wasn't his fault in terms of the fact he seemed to get sucked into the back of Vinales, but I think he could have prevented it from happening in the first place by not trying to sort of just stick right on the back of him and try and get straight back past him. He probably should have thought, you know what, I'm not going to be able to get back through here. I should just basically accept I've lost the corner and then try and maybe repass him at a different turn. So maybe that's the only other thing he could have done. But yeah, a bit of a race incident. Obviously, Vinales didn't seem too happy. I hadn't really heard anything of what Bezzecchi had said. Most important thing really was that they were both okay, because it's a fast corner and we've seen some nasty crashes there in the past. And yeah, I think again probably was caused by the aero, because it just seemed like he just had no way of slowing down and avoiding him. He slammed on the brakes so hard that obviously he brought the rear wheel off the ground. But he kind of put himself in the compromising position, because he went from the full outside the track right to try and cut back onto him, and then all of a sudden he kind of realised he didn't have any grip anymore because he lost all his aero.
For me, I think it's a racing incident. I think it's just unfortunate. I think it's amazing they're both uninjured to some extent, but it just shows again that aero ride-out devices, just give us back like to 2012 bikes. Just give us bikes again. Don't care about the wings. I don't want to see these little bits hanging off them. They don't give anything to the sport. There's no need to have them, and it just I'm getting sick of GP. It's dull for most weeks. It's boring. The racing is average, and then every week there's an incident where someone's ride-out device fails, or tire pressure. Digi got a tire pressure penalty in probably one of the coldest races of the year in the sprint and lost 8 seconds.
Yeah.
It's just.
It's like when you see BSB last week, you see how good that racing was. Okay, there's a little bit of error with the Honda there, but not really much. And just shows how much better it is when it's raw and there's not so much interfering. They don't have to worry about tyre pressures. Just two guys absolutely going for it on a really narrow track as well. It's not super easy track to pass on. BSB showed it can be done. This is the problem with MotoGP at the moment, is that there's too much aero and electronic and interference and all these different mechanical devices and stuff.
Yeah, completely agree. It's gone too far, and again, I think to rob the phrase, once the genie's out of the box, it's very hard to kind of pull it back in. So I think that we're just stuck with this kind of mediocreness for the next couple of years. And we do still get good races. We had a good last few laps, I suppose, for the Sunday race. People were banging on. That was amazing. Didn't see it that way.
It was quite a good race, I thought.
It was
one of the best ones we've had for a while. One of the best ones of the year, probably, but that's probably just because the races this year haven't been that good.
I agree, but for me, right, if Marquez's tear-off doesn't go under his back wheel, he doesn't have to burn out and lose positions, I think he sits on the back of Martin and does what he does anyway. I think we have a pretty dull race where it's just like building until Marquez overtakes him. I think Marquez had it in hand.
Can't judge a race by that, like what could have happened, though.
Yeah,
really.
It's just true, I suppose. Yeah, that's true. But the fact
Jello would have been really good if like the top 5 all like hit a rain shower and ran off the track, and there was like a Yamaha and a Honda battling. Like it didn't happen.
Yeah, but I just in like if that's a shock kind of incident happened. The tire spinning up on the tear off was pretty kind of comical to see the slow mos of it, how it all happened, and it just spits it out the back, and you wouldn't think a tear off would make that much difference, but yeah, it clearly just set the tire off and it just span up mad. But I think Marquez was winning today regardless. I think Pecco didn't have anything for either of them, and I think
he was so fast, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was just ridiculous. I think Marquez sits there if he doesn't have the bad start. But I suppose we have to really give it to the two guys in the front. They made their race so good. But just to kind of get back to the Bezzecchi incident, he is aggressive on the corner entry, and he's had it a few times. If you go back to Mandalika, he had it same where he nearly hit what's his face, Pecco, and in Silverstone last year. Remember where he gained massively on Pecco and
He
crashed.
almost hit Becco there
So
too. Yeah.
there is something there, but we then need to remember that have the Alex Marquez as well.
He has a lot of incidents and crashes, does Bezzecchi. He definitely gets his elbows out, whereas Vinales is the opposite.
Yeah.
He very rarely gets involved in these things.
Yeah. But also this year we saw that, or was it this? It was this year, yeah, because it was Alex Marquez into turn one at Mugello, lost all his aero, and like nearly ran Miller off the track at a crazy speed. So again, it's just we need to get rid of the wings and these aero pairings. We just need to get rid of them. It won't be.
I reckon that's what happened to Nakagami. It wasn't a Catalunya a few years ago. I mean, he was miles back. So
Yeah, he completely
his
broke
fault,
himself, but you could, and it didn't happen to Bastianini as well. That
yeah,
into
the year after. Yeah.
the year after, so like it's just an RNG factor that we don't need in the top level of motorbike racing, which is just really, for me, it's a shame. But I suppose to kind of finish with the podcast, in my opinion, it's in Martin's hands now. Are you in agreement to that, or am I looking too far ahead?
I can't trust either of them enough to say that for sure, because they've both crashed so many times. But it does seem like more in the hot seat, and I feel like Martin has now he's won a Grand Prix again since obviously Mandalika. He crashed out the sprint race, trying to pull away and sort of do a thing, and at that point of the season, it kind of felt like to me he made some silly mistakes, like in Misano when he'd done the pit stop. He was so obsessed with the fact he hadn't won a Grand Prix since Le Mans. I think he was focused on that too much, but he's won one now, so I think he's a bit more, because he won at Mandalika, a bit more calm. He's doubled his points lead this round, which I think is quite a good confidence booster, because like last year, remember here, he shredded his tyre, so again, probably another demon that he's managed to sort of banish. Obviously, we've got Chang, where he won last year. There was obviously Sepang, which he didn't win out last year, but he was fairly strong. Valencia, where he looked stronger than Bagnaia, but was kind of on the back foot with the points, so rode a bit weirdly and desperately and almost took him out, and then crashed into back on Marquez doing some silly pass. So yeah, I think he could be in the hot seat now. I think he's just got to. It'll be easier to tell after Thailand. I think if he beats Bagnaia in both Thailand races, it's getting to the point where it's kind of over, because he can just sit behind him. I think Valencia is a Marquez double anyway, so I don't think the top points are even available for either of them. So yeah, I think it could. It all depends on what happens in Thailand. I think if Thailand the lead goes up, I think it really is in Martin's corner, because he can afford to just finish second to Bagnaia, which I think he will do. I think he'll be happy to do that. And like I said, I think Marquez will win at Valencia, so I think that will take the top points away anyway, which makes it even harder for Bagnaia. And Bagnaia might have to get his elbows out against someone like Marquez at one of these tracks if he needs to win. And there's somebody else up there. If there's a Bastianini's good at Sepang, he might have to let the brake off. He might have to do something a bit desperate because he needs those points. And we haven't really seen that so far. We haven't seen it from Bagnaia ever either, because whilst he's been a pursuer in the past, going into the last couple of rounds, he's always been the leader and had to just finish. He's never really been the chaser, and we've seen him potentially do a couple of weird, desperate things before when he thinks races are going away from him. If he thinks the championship's going away from him, could we see some of these rash moves potentially come out, and it could play against him, could work really well for him? So, yeah, I think it all depends what... basically, to sit on the fence saying, I don't know 100%, but I think after Chang, if the points gap goes up, I think, yes, it's in Martin's hands. If the points gap stays the same or goes down, I don't think it's fully sort of dealt with yet. And but I think if it does go up, we will see the pressure really pile onto Bagnaia, and we could see a mistake, which basically settles it completely. I think if there's any other crashes from Bagnaia now, I think it is over. So obviously the lead is pretty healthy now, 20 points. That's, like you say, nearly a race wins worth. So it is the start finishing behind the guy territory. But of course, it's hard to do that in modern day GP because people are so competitive, and you never know. You could get a Marquez or a Bastianini randomly turn up all of a sudden. You think, oh, I'm now fourth and Pecco's winning, and yeah, it's very difficult to call because it has been a little bit strange, a little bit weird at some of these rounds. And even though on paper you're like, oh, he won there last year, that's not what he's translated this year. But I think if Martin can extend the lead at Thailand, I think it is pretty much his at this point.
Yeah, I pretty much agree that it comes down to Thailand for me. I think that would be we'll either see 2 championships confirmed and 1 set to be confirmed in Reeve, Thailand, or we'll be talking about how it's going to go down to the last laps in Valencia. It's interesting you think that Marcus has Valencia covered. I can't see it. I know what you mean. It's one of those tracks where he goes really well on a Ducati there, so I wouldn't be surprised, but he'll be a massive question mark in the Valencia weekend if we go there with the two of them close on points. But I suppose that will do it for Phillip Island. It's another racetrack that really serves up good racing, and we're getting into the real end of the season fibres now, where we're down to the very last bits, and 1 or 2 mistakes could settle this. And again, you mentioned that 1 mistake from Pecco and it's over, and again it could be exactly the same. 1 bad mistake from Martin could hand it to Pecco. So we will love you and leave you. We'll be back next week for the Thai Grand Prix, where maybe we could have all 3 championships settled. Thanks for listening. See you next time.